So the US tax code every year gets refreshed. And you know how big the US tax code is? 80,000 pages.
Okay.
Okay. So if we were to have you, me, and everybody in this room sit down and try to encode it, we'd be here till we have great grandchildren. Right? It would be very difficult. So what has happened is that we have created something called knowledge management, which basically takes this textual representation of the tax rules, which is basically your English representation, converts them into machine readable rules, right? Which is then converted into code. So the whole process, see, because the tax code comes out at a particular time, and the first tax peak, which is the first time people file taxes, comes right after that,
Right.
a month or two after that, very little time. So we have created the capability for us to digest all of the tax code in a very short period of time, so we can serve the customers up-to-date tax regulations when they use our product. Right?
I think probably Feb is going to be your peak time, right? With respect to the number of users on TurboTax.
So this is our what we call the first peak,
Right.
which is happening. We just ended actually.
Right.
It starts end of January and ends around this time, and then the other big period is April 16th, which is when all of the United States does it.
Absolutely. So just I think one or two more questions, and then we'll just continue with our. So there's a point being made here saying, when we open up and build on top of APIs, right? So is there a possibility that we probably don't, or we probably lose focus in terms of the product roadmap itself, or are we getting extremely dependent on the other partner that opens up the API? So that is a thought, and the follow-up question to that from another gentleman is, would there be a time frame for the dependence on APIs, and in parallel should you probably be looking to build that out yourself, or is it just better to keep building the other gaps that you feel and focus on working with the APIs?
So you might have heard that with infinite number of monkeys and infinite number of typewriters, you can create Hamlet, right? Same thing with engineers. We have very smart engineers in India and around the world. And if you want to create something, absolutely you can do a spectacular job. Do you have the time? What is it you'd like to do, right? So we need to leverage what is available. And again, I'll just repeat the mantra, focus on what you think your core competency is. If your core competency is creating a solution for vegetable vendors or creating a solution for time management for high-tech firms, focus on that now. Use some other building block. For example, when you're writing an article, right, do you first sit down and code up something like Microsoft Word? You don't. You use Microsoft
what
Word.
is already ready.
Right? In the same way with Gmail, right? So why reinvent the wheel? Make use of it. Now, do you get dependent on it? Absolutely. There are ways to tackle that. For example, one of the classic architectural patterns that you can use is you create a layer of abstraction, right? So you create your own APIs you develop on top of. Underneath that, you can have one platform. If you get sick and tired of that platform, it's not doing the right for you, you can replace it with another platform. This allows you to do that in a fairly clean architectural manner, which is what I would advise everybody to do. But if a platform is delivering what you want it to, then why not? And trying to do something or recreate it at the same time as trying to use the APIs, I don't think is a wise thing to do, because you're wasting your time.
Absolutely. I think that was a very useful input, Sanket, because we had a lot of questions on this space, and I'm sure many of them got their answers. One more popular question, I think, around product itself. So a lot of people feel, when they build the product, they build it with a lot of founders' bias. They see the problem that they probably have faced, and they're convinced that this is a problem that the market faces. There are two dilemmas there. One, what is the right time to just kill the product if I feel it's not going anywhere? Or in an easier way to put it, how do you determine the product market fit?
Yeah, it's difficult. So I think the best thing I can do is talk about our own journey, right? So we started off as an application on MS-DOS. Then came the era of Windows. We were doing fairly well, but we were like, look, this seems to be the thing to embrace, and we did it. And then came the internet. So it's kind of a client-server-like model. Then came the cloud. Now we're in the mobile and AI first mode. we've been transforming ourselves as we go along, right? So one has to have the mindset. If you're too stuck, and that's what I was talking about earlier, fall in love with the problem, the what that you're trying to solve,
Right.
and the what should be determined based on who your customer base is, not you.
Right.
Okay? And then the how, as in how you solve the problem, you should come up with a solution, but keep on refining it as you go along. A classic example is Netflix. So Netflix was doing really well. Netflix originally was a company that used to rent out DVDs. You know what their USP was? What was Netflix's biggest product?
From the renting of DVDs part.
So everybody says it's the DVDs that you got, but no, it was the recommendation engine. Right? That was a key part, and they realized that. So in I think 2007 or 2008, they made the big decision of going full streaming, get rid of the DVDs part, and I believe that their stock price tanked. And everybody's like, "What the heck are you guys doing? You're a successful company doing really, really well. Why are you doing this?" Right? And but they stuck to the plan. Today, even in a country like India, where till like a few years ago, people said no Indian paid for software, which was complete rubbish, but there was a reputation. Netflix is one of the biggest markets, right? And Netflix average price is probably at least 8 to 9 times what Amazon Prime costs. Both are doing really well. People are willing to pay. But what did Netflix do? They figured out what the trend was and went towards it. Now the other part is when you know when to shut shop. That's the most difficult question because who knows, maybe some interesting thing is coming around the bend. But what I'll add, so I don't think anybody can really pontificate on that, but what I'd like to say is the most important thing is keep your finger on the pulse of your customers. Have your customer orientation, regularly do what we call follow me homes, understand how they're using the product, what are the pain points, don't ask them the problem, observe.
Right.
And then try to address it. With that, I think you will be heading on your path to success.
I think that was a very interesting point, right? So do not have the founder's bias, but be extremely biased towards the customer. I think the entire follow me home, what you very briefly mentioned, could you probably elaborate on that, just a bit? Because I think that's a very, very important thing in their own ways that the startups have to do, right? Obsess over their customers.
Yeah. So I'll give you two examples. I don't know, were you a student of sociology ever? So there is something called research methodology that you study when you study the finer sciences. And in that there's something called participant observation, which basically means that you immerse yourself in who you're trying to study and try to observe them from that perspective. It'll give you insights like whatnot, right? So that's follow me homes. So what we do is we go to a customer or a potential customer or even to somebody using a competitor's product and just observe. It sounds very odd that you're there and just looking, but that's what we do, right? And we try to see what is it that's a potential pain point. Now a classic example of a wrong pain point was illustrated in this movie, The Three Idiots. I love this example, you might have heard me saying this before. But there was a problem that the American scientists were trying to solve, is how to invent a pen that could write in no gravity, that could write upside down, right? That was the problem statement given, and I think the technology crowd did an amazing job to come up with a space pen. You can buy a space pen in a NASA museum. Cost millions of dollars, right? But was that the real problem they were trying to solve? No. So you ask the people what you need, they say we need a pen that writes in no gravity, when actually the problem was we just need to be able to write in no gravity, right? That was the pain point. And the example given in Three Idiots was Russians used a pencil. So it cost them 25 cents to be able to solve a problem that took millions of dollars for the Americans to solve. Why? Because the problem statement was not correct. And I think there's a lot we can learn from that.
So just going back again, MVP to PMF, I just want to bridge this point that you made, right? Define your problem statement really well along with your customers and not as the founding team or as the product manager.
Yes.
Right? So I think what's very important, given that there are a lot of product entrepreneurs here on this session, is I think this is a very important takeaway. Build with your customers and not just for your customers.
Yes.
Right? And which is where also the follow me home comes in, where you keep observing what they're doing with your products, and how are they using your product, so that you know, are they really using yours the way they should be.
Yeah.
Is there something that you would quickly want to touch with respect to building for a market that that probably there are two things. One is creating a market, which is what a lot of folks would love to believe. That we are building for a product that for a market that doesn't exist, right? So that's a very common say, though probably there are competitors. And again, there's another thing which is not you're creating a market, but it's a slightly competitive market, right? So these are two different things which even an Intuit has faced. In certain markets, you never had customers that probably saw this as a need, but you were able to create that habit and get them on board. Probably those are the markets where you're market leaders, and you've also entered markets where probably there's already existing competition, and you're trying to bring in a new habit. Would you want to briefly touch on these two? On your thoughts on entering a market or creating a market versus entering a market with existing competition?
Yeah.
How should our product, startups on this call look at from a GTM strategy?
So, first of all, in this day and age, a first mover advantage doesn't really exist.
Okay.
No matter which area you go in, there's always somebody. In fact, it's to your advantage to be second, third, fourth mover, because you learn from the mistakes and are able to then customize what you're trying to deliver. That's one of the key messages I'd like to put forth, is that learn from your competition, right? There's a whole concept of creating your own blue ocean in a Red Sea, right? So you might have competitors all over the place. Figure out from there where your niche could be. There is always a niche. You have to just try to find it. The problem is, a lot of companies try to find too broad an area because they want world domination, right? But you can do really well by making the right bolt for a particular machine which is inside, say, a scooter, right? So you have to figure out that niche and do a really, really good job with it. Without that, I think it's super difficult.
I think everyone wants to have a very large target addressable market, right? So we love talking in the billions, if not more. But I think that's a very important point, right? In terms of find your niche where you can add a lot more value than your next best competitor.
Yeah.
So having said that, given that we're also coming towards the end of the session, we would be taking a few more questions that keep coming in. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions from my end as well. Probably last 10 minutes, guys, because we started late and I don't want to take too much of your time beyond this. Is there any book that you would suggest for a lot of the young entrepreneurs that probably you feel has made a difference in your life? It need not be a very core business or product book. It could be any book that you feel has had an impact in the way that you probably run into it today, or any of your past forays.
That's a tough question.
There's never one book, right?
There's never one book. There's so many ways in which you get influenced.
In fact, maybe to keep it a bit more simpler, my question to you would be: is there any one or two books that you can think of, or are there any internet resources that you feel people should read up, or it could even be people that people should folks should follow in terms of blogs or something that you feel has made some impact to what you are today?
Yeah. So there's so many. Today on the internet, it's all over the place. So one has to be very careful what you spend time on, right? There's a book that is very dear to me, and that has made a difference in my life in how I run an organization. And I think it's a very important one for all entrepreneurs to read. It's called Execution.
Execution.
I don't know if you've read that. It's by Ram Charan and Larry Possibly. And it's a very simple book, very well written, teaches you the fundamentals of how to interact with people and make sure everybody is marching in the same path. Really important, right? The other one, you might laugh at this, but I think it teaches us a lot, is read a lot of Dilbert. It tells you what not to do, right? And I'm telling you, because there's lots of tidbits in there which are just mind-boggling. And then you look around your organization, those are the things that exist. What do how can you address this? The third one is I'm forgetting the name of the book, but it talks about the whole concept of creating your own blue ocean. I think it's called the blue ocean
Blue
strategy.
ocean strategy.
That changed my life,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because, and it applies to everything, right? And especially when you're coming up with your market penetration strategies, because it makes you realize that no matter how dire the whole thing looks, you can create your own competition, right? You can create your own playing field and do a great job of it. So these are the three that come to mind. But overall, I think people should be voracious readers, and if not that, at least be voracious listeners to podcasts because you
course,
learn so much from it. I love listening to interviews of people who have done really well in whatever niche areas they've got. Because in those short 10-15 minutes, you pick up quite a bit.
Totally. I think I can relate to you. Podcasts make a huge difference, especially if you're in Bangalore. Most of my drive time in the car goes with podcasts, right? So I think saves a lot of time. I quickly have one last question for you, Sanket. If there's one tip that you would want to give a lot of the early stage entrepreneurs on our session today, a lot of them are with their first few customers. What is it that you would guide them on?
So the fundamentals of how to come up with product, etc. we spoke about. I will say one thing, and this is something that's really dear to me, which is humility, right? And it's with humility that you're able to truly respect who you're dealing with. And the king in this endeavor is your customer. So always go from a position of humility and try to see how best you can affect in a positive way the lives of whoever you interact with. I think it's extremely important. And I'll just end with one more thing that I just reheard just yesterday, that I think Jeff Bezos said it, that unless people are calling you a complete nutcase, you're not doing the right things.
So we're going to end this session here, but we've got a bunch of last minute questions. So if you don't mind, one last question, Sanket.
Absolutely.
So in fact, I think I'm going to break it down into two smaller questions. One is very specific to a lot of folks are asking about how they can work with Intuit, right? So I'm going to phrase it in a very simpler way. What kind of startups would Intuit look at when it comes to either integrating, when it comes to integration or working closely with when it comes to startups from India?
Of course. So with Intuit Circles, we have no guardrails because Intuit's mission, like I told, is powering prosperity around the world. Our customers range from all kinds of stuff. We have candle makers and we have high-tech people, all customers. So as far as being part of Intuit Circles, everybody's welcome. In the integration space, obviously you have to have some kind of a technology bent. If you would like to create a particular product for our app store, typically it has to have some adjacency to our products. Right? Might be an extension. Now, just because we might have a solution to that particular problem does not mean you don't create one.
Right.
I gave the example of T-sheets. They created a better one. We ended up
Go
buying
deeper.
them.
Correct.
Right? So you should not hold back in that. But even companies who have products that are not adjacent to what we have but need some kind of a financial backend, those are more than welcome because you can do your private integrations and create an app on a solid fintech foundation. It will help you in immense number of ways. So all are welcome, but that fintech angle has to be there some way or the other because that's the space for it.
Absolutely. So just to summarize some of the very important points today, and again, I think in a way that's going to answer a lot of questions that's come on global market access, right? Two very interesting points that you mentioned, which is, if I had to say what are those key things to remember when you're expanding to global market, the first one could be, understand the geography that you're looking to expand into really well. Don't go very wide, right? So don't say all the 200 countries are what I'm going to cater to on day one. Understand geographies really well because usage differs, pricing differs, right? So the strategies around these differ. So have a decent understanding into those geographies. It could be direct, it could be through partners in those geographies. Second is, as much as possible, try integrating with existing products which are adjacent to what you're doing so that it's a faster GTM there, which is nothing but collaboration with other partners or other companies. Are there anything else on the top of your mind that you feel, that we as people looking to expand into the global market should remember?
Um, I'll just add one part.
Sure.
When coming up with solutions, think big, think very broad, right? One of the fundamental principles behind everything we do is that we don't have any guardrails that dictate what a particular solution should be. I'll give you an example. Suppose in this room, I ask you, how would you change a light bulb? What would you say about that?
And first, try getting a furniture that's going to take me to that height, and then try unscrewing the bulb and try removing it.
So that's one of the key ones, right? But what if I was to say, hey, I'd like to bring in a monkey and train the monkey to do that, right? That's a possibility, right? That could happen. Maybe train a bat, right? Or perhaps have some other mechanism. So the whole point is, oftentimes when coming up with solutions, we use our own inhibitions and our own experiences to basically cut down on number of possibilities.
Right.
One should not do that. Think freely. Plus, especially if you're in a group, by thinking crazy ideas like this, it enables everybody to come up and sound out their own ideas. Because oftentimes there's this inhibition. What I'm saying, is it going to be interesting? Is it applicable or not? But sometimes there's a gem of an idea. So go broad and then you go narrow. Out of all of these crazy ideas, pick the right one, which is what you said.
I think that was probably the best advice to almost everyone out there today. If I can probably use my own words here, can I say think broad, build narrow, right? I love a larger brainstorming, different ideas. Don't restrict your ideation sessions.
Yeah.
But when you decide to build, don't build broad, but focus on those key niche areas that you want to solve here.
Absolutely.
I think that is probably the core of the day, right? Think broad, build niche, or build narrow. Very, very important and relevant to almost everyone building, right? Because we probably do the complete opposite of what you just said. We probably think narrow because as a PM or as a founder, I believe in the problem that I feel has to be solved, whether I've validated with customers who are ready to use or pay for it, and I probably want to have the entire world as my users, right? So thank you so much, Sanket, and I think that was a wonderful 1 hour with you. And for everyone out there, thank you so much for being with us. The team has shared 2 links, for you. One is a link that takes you to a feedback form that allows you to also share any additional questions that you feel we were not able to address with Sanket today. It's definitely on us to take it up with him over the next week or 2 and get a bunch of your questions answered, right? So that's a commitment. We will definitely ensure that some of your key questions are answered beyond this session as well. There is going to be engagement through the year. And the second part is, for people who have raised questions on how do you want to engage with Intuit Circles, right? So you've also had a link on the chat here. You could click on the link and go there, fill up the form, and you would have someone reaching out to you in the next 24 to 48 hours on how you could work with Intuit Circles and what you get out of it. Thank you so much, Sanket, and it was wonderful hosting you today.
Thank you, Gautam. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.